Okay. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. So before I move into today's topic, I'm going to do a very quick summary of last week's topic, what we studied last week. And that was basically the three types of nafs, right? We were talking about the self and the importance of knowing the self and the importance of knowing Allah and how those two things come together to kind of bring us closer to Allah and lead productive lives, right? So the three types of nafs that Allah specifically mentions in the Quran, right? Number one is nafs ammara bis-su', right? And this is mentioned in Surah Yusuf, where Allah says that, Yusuf alayhi salam says that, people are inclined to evil, right? This nafs is the type of nafs that is inclined towards evil naturally, right? And it needs to be stopped from evil, but the people who have this nafs, they're not really looking to stop themselves, right? It's a very indulgent type of nafs. And then the second one is nafs lawwama, and this is mentioned in Surah Al-Qiyamah, where Allah says, وَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِالنَّفْسِ اللَّوَّامَةِ, and Allah is talking about how this is the nafs kind of in the middle, right? So we have ammara bis-su', which is at the bottom, and in the middle we have nafs lawwama, which is the one that is it's the nafs that is self-blaming, right? It takes account of itself, and this is a kind of blame that is a good kind of blame, right? So it's taking account of itself, and it basically like the person, when they commit a sin, they come back to Allah, right? They come back to do tawbah. They want to reconcile things with Allah. So this nafs is kind of like in that state of struggle. And then the highest level of the three nafs is nafsul mutma'inna, and this Allah mentions in Surah Al-Fajr, and He says that it will be said to nafsul mutma'inna on the Day of Judgment that come back to your Lord and enter my, like Allah says, come back to me and enter my paradise, right? So this is the nafs that is at peace, it is calm, it carries itself with dignity. It's the kind of person who has gone through enough tazkiyah to purify themselves, purify their heart, and they've reached the higher level of nafs, and now they're at this place where they're obedient to Allah, and Allah will be pleased with this nafs. And then we spoke about the further categorization that the scholars made of the nufus, and these are the four different types of nufus. The first one was the bahimi nafs, right? The bahimi nafs is the cattle-like nafs. Then we have the sab'i nafs, right, which is the predatory nafs. Then we have so the bahimi nafs is the lazy one, right? The one that has no goals, no ambition. It just kind of exists, right? The sab'i nafs, which is a predatory one, is like, okay, it has some goals. It wants to do things in life, but it's very greedy, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't it will basically, it doesn't care if it like steps over people to get to its goals, right? Then we have the shaitani nafs, which is like, okay, these people are just plain evil, right? Human shayateen. They actively want to harm people, and they don't care, right? They don't fear Allah, and these are the kinds of very careless and evil people who will be punished by Allah. And then we have the malaiki nafs, right? The malaiki nafs is the one that's angelic. It naturally wants to obey Allah. This person has purified themselves enough to the point where good becomes easy and desirable, and haram becomes undesirable, right? And they want to actively stay away from that. So one of the ayahs we did last week was this one, and I wanted to bring it back just to kind of connect the two concepts. So Allah says in the Quran, we will show them our signs in the universe and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that this Quran is the truth. Is it not enough that your Lord is a witness over all things? And about this ayah we said, yes, I was just reviewing. So about this ayah we said that when Allah tells us to reflect upon the creation, right? In the Quran Allah says, do tadabbur, do tafakkur. Allah wants us to reflect on the signs in the universe, but He also wants us to look within ourselves. Okay, what am I good at? What am I doing right? How am I treating people? He wants us to look within and see His signs, right? The more we know ourselves, the more we come to know Allah, because the more we see our weakness, the more we see Allah's power, the more we see Allah's strength. And then Allah says, is it not enough that your Lord is a witness over all things, right? This last part of the ayah is actually it's a type of warning, right? Because Allah is saying, like, be careful because I'm watching you, right? It's like Allah saying, like, I know exactly what you're doing. Whether you're hiding it from yourself, you're hiding it from other people, I know exactly what you're doing. And on the other hand, it's actually very comforting as well, because it's like, okay, maybe somebody else doesn't see my efforts, right? Somebody else doesn't recognize everything that I've done for them, right? Maybe they just turn a blind eye. Maybe they've ignored me. Maybe they've ignored what I've done for them. But Allah is the witness, right? Allah is writing down everything that you do. Maybe you picked up some trash at the masjid when nobody was looking, right? Maybe you like helped somebody in need and nobody knew that you helped them. There was no advertising. It wasn't a public donation, but Allah was a witness, right? Allah knew exactly what you were doing and He recorded it for you. So I want to connect this concept with the concept of influence. So your voice is your master, right? This is a concept. What I'm trying to basically say is that you're always being influenced by something or someone, even if you're not aware, right? So sometimes people think, oh yeah, I'm independent, I'm a critical thinker, I'm educated, I can make my own decisions, nobody can influence me. But actually, all of us are influenced, right? So instead of lying to ourselves that we're not being influenced, right? The smarter thing to do, the more effective thing to do, is to examine, okay, who am I being influenced by? Right? Whose voice am I listening to? So these are the 4 different voices per se. And when I say voice, I don't mean like somebody's whispering in your ear. I mean voice as in your thoughts, right? Your thoughts are being, manipulated. So, or not, I shouldn't say manipulated for Allah, but it's like Allah's giving you inspiration, right? So we have Allah, we have the angels, we have shaitan, and then we have our own nafs, right? Or, based on our experiences and our temperament, our personality, all of that. So when Allah inspires you, right, you feel like it's basically ilham. We talked about the concept of ilham before, where you feel like it's a calmness that takes over you. It's not very, it doesn't disturb your heart. It feels very calm, like you're taking the right decision. You start to get clarity. Things start to, like you understand certain things that are happening in your life. And it usually happens slowly. When Allah wants you to make a decision, usually happens very slowly. It's not like hasty, like I have to do this right now. But usually, like if on the other hand, if shaitan is telling you to do something, right, if he's influencing you, there's a sense of haste, there's a sense of impatience there, right? There's doubt, there's confusion, there's chaos. People who are very, very influenced by shaitan, like if they have excessive waswasa, they won't be able to tell the difference between like a good decision and a bad decision, or like a bad decision and a worse decision. So it's really hard for them to differentiate like right from wrong. And even practicing Muslims, they can have like excessive waswasa, where shaitan is like taking them for a ride, right? They don't really understand what they should do. So and this can happen from the jinn or the human shayateen as well, right? If you have bad people around you who are giving you bad advice, then they will also cause confusion and chaos, right? Sometimes you have someone that you trust, for example, in your family, and then they tell you like wrong information about other people in the family, right? And you trust this person, so you think, okay, they might be right about the other person. But then later you meet the other person and they tell you something about this person, and you're like, oh, like what just happened, right? Right, you're confused because you're like, oh, but I trusted you, right? And you're telling me information about this person, like, oh, this person was talking about you maybe, or like it happens with friends, it can happen with families, in-laws, whoever, right? And now you're like, wait a second, like, who do I trust, right? Or who am I supposed to be listening to? So the people, like, and some do it deliberately, right? They want to cause a fight. Like maybe somebody will tell someone something about their husband or their wife, like, oh, she said something, she did something, or he did something. And then it like makes the person doubt, and they go into suspicion, and they're like, oh, what if this happened? So a person who doesn't like have mastery over their mind, like their thoughts, they're not really watching them, not thinking clearly, they can get lost in this mess, right? Because they don't realize that I'm being influenced. So it's really important to know that, okay, somebody's influencing my thoughts right now. So if somebody tells you, the first time they tell you, like, okay, this person said this about you, you should go immediately and clarify, right? Like, oh, this person told me, did you actually say this? And maybe they might be like, oh, there was a misunderstanding, then we can clear it, right? But if we don't ask the other person, then we can continue like thinking about it, right? So it's always good to like bring things out into the open and to talk about it and clarify. So now if the thoughts are coming from yourself, right? This reflects the state of your heart. It's always going to change. If your heart is in a good space, then the thoughts you're gonna have are gonna be good as well. But if your heart is diseased, if you have envy in your heart for somebody, hasad, if you have kibr, if you have arrogance in your heart, if you're very stingy and miserly and greedy, right? So if you don't purify your heart, it's going to affect the thoughts that you have, right? There are some people, they always find something negative about everybody, right? Every time they see somebody, oh, did you see her dress? Did you see her hair? Did you see this? Did you see the way they spend money at the wedding? Or did you see the way, like they're always talking about other people's matters, right? We're not supposed to. The Prophet ﷺ said that min husn al-Islam, like, you know, from the perfection of your Islam is that you leave what doesn't concern you, right? It's none of your business, don't talk about it. But most people, when they're not paying attention, they just keep talking about other people, right? Gossiping. Also the type of nafs that you have. So if you have a sabu'i nafs, a predatory nafs, the one that wants to like always get more and be greedy, then you're going to be talking about you're going to be thinking, your thoughts are going to be, okay, how do I beat this person, right? Always in competition with somebody else. How do I be better than this person? But not like in a healthy competition. It's like, okay, how do I make them look bad even, right? Because if you're greedy, you want to make other people look bad and you want to make yourself look good. Same with arrogance. If you're arrogant, it means you have very low self-esteem, right? So you're trying to appear better. So now you have to make somebody else look bad, right? Because if you don't do that, then you'll look bad, right? So if whatever nafs you have in that moment, because our nafs can change as well, right? So whatever nafs you have and whatever your heart state is in, it's going to impact your thoughts, and it's going to impact your speech and your behavior, right? And then the last one is the angels. So the angels actually do also give us inspiration, right? So sometimes it can come directly from Allah, where He like puts something in your heart, but sometimes the angels also give you thoughts, right? They might remind you to do a good deed. Like you're walking by the sadaqah box, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, let me put $1 in, right? That might be the angel, because it's like all of a sudden, but it's a good thing, right? Where shaitan, it's like all of a sudden, but it's a sin. They want you to do some bad deed. But the angels might, like, you might have a sudden urge, like maybe you don't have, like, let's say, you don't have the habit, let's say, of visiting somebody who's sick, right? Maybe it's not something that you do, you just don't really, you're busy, whatever, like you do other good deeds, but you don't visit people who are sick. And then one day, out of the blue, you're like, oh, you know, my so-and-so's aunt is sick, she's in the hospital, let me just go and visit her. And you never do that. It's just out of the blue, right? Maybe the angels gave you an idea, right? Like, okay, go do this good deed. So the angels can come up with these ideas to just, you know, kind of put in your mind, okay, go do something good, right? And maybe it's something that you need in that time. All right, so the power of input. So by input, I mean, like, again, the voices that are coming in our head. So one of the things we do as human beings all the time is that we spend too much time thinking about the wrong things, right? And we spend too little time thinking about the right ones. So we are actively choosing our thoughts, but we don't know that. We think that our thoughts are just coming to us and we're like helpless. Oh, I can't help it. I can't help what I think about. Actually, we can, right? So I want you to ask yourself these questions. How often do you replay your painful memories in your head? For some people, the answer is a lot. For some, it's a little. You know, it depends. Like some people who have been through a lot of trauma and stuff, they'll consistently think about the painful memory, and then they're just like, it'll basically bring them down, right? And shaitan's role, what's his role when you're thinking negatively, right? Shaitan is going to make it worse, right? Anything bad in your mind, anything negative in your mind, shaitan's going to come in like he's like lighting the match, you know, like, how can I destroy this person completely, right? Because shaitan's our enemy. So any tool he has, any weapon he has, he can use it against us. So that's why he can use our mind against us if we don't strengthen it, right? How often do you think about the hurtful things people said, right? Maybe somebody said something to you and they were wrong, right? But if you keep thinking about it, then you're hurting so much, it becomes really hard to forgive the person, right? That's why a lot of people, even though something small happened, maybe like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, they can't forget it, right? Like they won't go to that person's, you know, child's wedding, they won't go to visit them when they're sick, because like, oh, do you know what this person said to me 10 years ago? She was so disrespectful. Or like, you know, she said something about whoever. But it's like you went all these years because your heart became hard, right? So you kept thinking about it, and then also you kept telling other people, right? When something bad happens and then we keep telling other people, it's just, we're making it bigger and bigger and bigger. When instead we could just be like, okay, this person said this, they were wrong, it hurt me, and can I forgive them for the sake of Allah, right? Maybe Ramadan comes around, or like you go for Hajj or Umrah, you'll forgive them and you move on, right? But a lot of people don't move on, right? So and then shaitan gets a hold of their mind. That's how it works. Okay, so when it comes to your like failures or disasters, like if you think, oh, I can't do something, or let's say I tried to start a business and I failed, or I tried to apply for this job and I didn't get it. Maybe I'm just a loser, right? Maybe it's not meant for me. I'm not supposed to have good things, right? People become very negative. So that's how you can go into depression as well, right? So all of these are different avenues. These are all things that we naturally experience, right? That's the point. We all naturally have these things. But if we keep them there, right? If we keep focusing, Shaitan can come, that's his chance. Then he can make it bigger. But if we can fight it, then we can move on to the other side, right? Okay, so if you're consistently thinking wrong, right, you're going to consistently act wrong. Somebody who thinks that they've been wronged over and over, like somebody thinks they're the mazloom, they're more likely to become the zalim. Not always, but sometimes it happens. If you think, right, that you've been wronged, if you think that everybody's against you, then you think everyone's your enemy, you might become their enemy. Because first it starts out of fear. You're so scared, right? And I've literally seen people do this. They're so scared and paranoid, they think everybody wants to harm them. Like, oh, my husband's my enemy, my mother-in-law's my enemy, my sister's my enemy, my sister-in-law's my enemy, my kids are my enemy, and then they just keep it in their mind and they collect these different things that people said, and then they start to become rude or mean, or they take away somebody's rights, right? So if your thinking is not right, your actions cannot be right, right? It's impossible, because if whatever's on the inside, it's not showing up on the outside. The solution is like, when you consistently think right, then you act right, right? If you have husn al-dhan, only then you can behave good with the people. Because if you don't have husn al-dhan and you're being good to people, what is that called? If you actually hate the people, let's say I secretly hate the people around me, I hate my family, hate my community, I don't trust anybody, but I'm just like forcing myself to be good to them, right? What would that be? So let's say I have bad thoughts about somebody, right? Like, let's say I hate a lot of people, I have grudges in my heart, I haven't forgiven them, and I'm like, I don't trust them, nothing good is in my mind about people, I don't have good thoughts about people, but I'm still being good to them. What do we call that?
I mean, you're trying to put it on those days, you feel that they're not good to you, but you still to push yourself to be good to you.
Okay, let me clarify. So that's the second part I was going to get to. The first one is like, you'd be a hypocrite, basically. Because you're like, some people who do that on purpose. Like, they know they hate you, but they still like give you a gift just to make you feel like they don't hate you. So that's the first kind of people, right? They're actually like, they're harboring evil intentions, right? Because their mind, their heart became deceased.
As you say, if you think that this person don't like it, 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 everybody is your enemy, then that's not a hypocrite. That's like you, okay, then you say, okay, no, this is not right. I mean, how can the multiple people just against me? It's something wrong. I want to fix it, so I'm not going to say, not hypocrite, but I want to see why would everyone hate me? Why would I don't have anyone relationship?
The person. She doesn't mean you as a person.
No, I'm talking about what you're saying. I was going to get to after.
I was prepared what she said. Not me.
Oh, it's a question.
It was a
Yeah, it was a question.
But it was the things that she said before. The person think about
Yeah.
what everyone hates the community, the husband, the children.
So they're paranoid, basically.
So then that person, if he act up and make it up, that's not hypocrite. He's trying to to be put a good.
Well, that's what the intention comes in. That's what I was trying to get to. What you're saying, I was going to get to that point. What I'm saying is, it matters what the intention is, because let's say, for example, there's person A and person B, right? Person A and person B have been through the same exact things. Okay, let's say both of them were abused by their father. Okay, both of them got into abusive marriages later. Both of them were betrayed by some family member or their best friend, and both of them are going through financial challenges. That's a lot, right? Yeah. From childhood till now. Now they're adults. Person A hates everybody. She hates men because her father abused her. She doesn't want any more friends. She doesn't trust anyone. She accuses people of being fake because her friend betrayed her in the past. Now she harbors resentment. Resentment is like ghil. You know ghil in Arabic? It's like you have that thing against somebody. You can't wish good for them. So when you have that heart, what can happen? Now you can have hasad. Now you can have, you don't have husn al-dhan anymore. You don't trust anybody anymore because you've been hurt so much, right? But you never dealt with it, right? Person A, they never actually dealt with it. So they just, now they have evil intentions about other people. At one time, they were the innocent ones, right? There was dhulm done upon them. Now they became the zalim, which is what I was saying earlier, right? If you were the one who had dhulm done upon you, and you never dealt with it, now your heart became corrupted. You never purified your heart. You never forgave anybody. You never learned to trust people again, right? You never healed your wounds. Now it's possible that you can become the zalim, right? Whereas person B, she was like, okay, you know what? All these horrible things happened to me, but I know it was Allah's plan. I trust Allah's plan. All these people were horrible, but you know what? I understand that it was qadarullah, right? Like I'm okay with it because I know Allah, had something good to come out of it. Then they learn again to trust people. Maybe they go to therapy, right? They move on, they forgive people, they clean their heart, right? So it's like you had the same exact thing. Person A and person B went through the same exact thing, but the state of their heart determines how they ended up, right? So we're talking about the mind, but again, in Islam, we talked about this before last week or the day before, where in Islam, it's not just the brain, right? It's not just the aqal, it's the qalb, right? The qalb is where like your intellect is actually seated, like your intellect and your emotions are in the qalb. So when you purify it, you purify not only your intentions, but you purify your thoughts, right? So the whole point of this lesson, influence, is like, okay, are you being influenced by your past now? That shaitan kind of, made it bigger and bigger? Or are you being influenced by all the knowledge that you had? And like you took the knowledge and you applied it to yourself and you purified your heart, you purified your thoughts, and now your behavior is going to be purified as a result, right? Because it's impossible if your mind is a mess, your behavior is going to be a mess, right? Yeah. So that was the point. Okay, so some people, like, they sometimes feel like they're stuck in life, right? Like they feel like no matter what they do, they're not actually moving forward in life. Why does that happen? It's because they're doing the same ineffective things over and over, right? Einstein said that insanity is to do the same thing over and over and to expect a different result, right? Like if you keep going, like, for example, if I keep driving down 95 at exactly like 7 a.m., right? I'm always gonna find traffic, right? There's not going to be a single day where I don't find traffic. It's because I keep going at 7 a.m. So it's my fault, right? Because I keep doing the same thing and I'm expecting, today I'll get to work on time. Today I'll get to work on time. And I never get to work on time because I'm doing the same thing over and over, right? Whereas what moves you forward in life, right? If you have an obstacle, how do you get over it? It's because you do something differently, right? And then when you pick the right thing to do, you do that over and over. Right, so somebody can't wake up for Fajr because they keep going to bed like at 12 a.m. Well, they keep doing the wrong thing over and over and they expect one day, I'm going to wake up for Fajr. But now they're like, okay, I have to change something, right? They start going to bed right after Isha, right? Right now it's late, but 10:30, let's say. They go to bed and then they keep doing that. Then they'll wake up for Fajr, right? So it's like, okay, which habit are you building? So whatever habit you build, you're going to get that result. But people think they can just get a different result out of nowhere, but it doesn't really work like that. Okay, so here I have a picture of a sponge because it's just like, visual. So your consistent input, like earlier we talked about the 4 different voices, right? There's the voice of Allah, the voice of the angels, the voice of shaitan, and your own nafs, right? Those are the 4 voices. So you have to ask yourself, which voice am I listening to? Right? This has to be a daily exercise, by the way. Umar radiallahu anh, he would do muhasabah almost like every single day. Like he would say that, may Allah have mercy on the one who shows me my faults, right? So he actually made a dua for the person who shows him what he needs to fix within himself, right? And a lot of us were like, but I'm busy and I'm tired and like I barely have time to pray. How can I, sit and do like muhasabah? Like how can I actually sit and reflect on myself? Like it's too much. It just takes literally like 10 minutes, right? You just sit there before bed, get a journal, take out your phone, the notes app, be like, okay, did I pray all my salah on time today? If you do check, then you do, okay, did I pray my sunnahs on time today? Check. Did I do my morning and evening azkar? Check. Right? Did I help someone today in need? Right? Somebody asked me for help. Did I help them? Just a small thing, right? Check. So you just like take account of yourself. Or did somebody tell me today that I offended them? Right? Did somebody tell me today that I hurt their feelings? Did I apologize? So you just like small questions you ask yourself and then you reflect. right? And also like you reflect on the quality of your thoughts. Like, was I really negative and moody today? Or was I quite positive and optimistic, right? Because being optimistic is like a sign of the believer. The Prophet ﷺ said he's amazed by optimism. It's something that like he found it really like inspirational and amazing, and he praised optimism, which is like husn al-dhan, right? Having husn al-dhan billah and having husn al-dhan for the people. So you have to ask yourself, like, every single day, what voices are you absorbing? So for example, like we observe things, right? And then we imitate the reactions of people around us. So for example, if you fail an exam or you lose a job or you go through money problems, it's common to see people complain, freak out, be negative, right? Or nothing goes right for me, I have all the problems in the world, whatever. And so it's very common, right? People always respond like this. But the solution to this is to choose your responses from the Prophet from the Prophet ﷺ's spiritual eyes, right? That's something we talked about way back, which is like, what was the response of Adam ﷺ, for example, when he was told to leave Jannah? What was his response? رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا, right? He immediately asked of Allah for forgiveness and for His help, right? When Nuh alayhi salam was overwhelmed, what did he do? He immediately turned to Allah, said, "Anni maghlubun fantasir," Ya Allah, I am overwhelmed, so help me, right? So the prophets, every time they had something, it wasn't about blaming Allah, it wasn't about becoming negative and moody and like, I'm so helpless and I'm so this and that's all from shaitan, right? That's shaitan's language. The Prophet's language is that they always turn back to Allah and they're always optimistic. They never lose hope in Allah. They always have their tawakkul. So then you have to, when you reflect, when you answer these questions, right, this thing that you're doing at night, when you think about it, then you'll be like, oh, this is my response and this is what it should be, right? And if you find a particular Prophet story inspirational, you should actually use that story. Like Musa alayhi salam's story for me is personally very inspirational. When he, says, "Rabbi inni lama anzalta ilayya min khairin faqir," after helping the two women. So, like whatever prophet you like that really resonates with you, take that prophet story and apply it to your life and be like, okay, what did this prophet do? And then do that, right? Because the prophets are there for us to learn from. And then as you become that person, actually Allah will give you more people like that in your life, right? Because sometimes we might be like, okay, well, I don't have good role models. I don't have friends who remind me of Allah. I don't have people I know who are good, who are practicing, who will give me good reminders. When you start walking when you start walking that path, and Allah sees your sincerity, then He brings those people to you. And He will surround you with those kinds of people who will give you the reminder, as long as you're sincere, right? So an example, like go to halaqahs. I don't know if you guys know Rabata. It's like an institute by Sheikha Tamara. And she runs like this whole she herself is a scholar, and then she has like her students, and they're all doing this Islamic studies courses, and they do like annual retreats for women. So that's a fun fact I want to put there. There's different there's different conferences, like there's Ilm Fest, there's Miftah. Get a bunch of Muslim girls together, go to Umrah or something. There's so many different ways to surround yourself with good positive energy that lifts you up. And then this quote is very common. You guys must have heard this before. You are the sum of the 5 people around you. Like if you ask somebody, like, who are you? All you need to see is who they spend their time with, right? The 5 people they spend the time with the most. It could be your family, your friends, your coworkers even. We spend a lot of time with our coworkers and don't think about it. So that's for offline. And online, people think online doesn't count. It does. Online counts because we spend I don't know, some people's screen averages are 4 hours a day, That's what's 4 times 7? 37? 42? I don't know. Whatever it is, it's that's a lot of your life to be spending online, right? So the shows that you watch, they influence you, right? And the TV characters, it was so funny because somebody once said to me, one of my students, she said to me, she was like, there's this a vibe that I'm going for. It's the kind of person I want to become. But she's like, I don't know how to describe it. And she was I think 20 at the time. It was pretty young. And I was like, okay, who is this person, right? She's like, well, she has this really cool vibe. She's not like any other girl I've ever seen. And I really want to be like her. And I'm like, okay, describe her to me. She ended up being a singer, right? And this singer, she's very unique looking. She's Arab, but she's weird features. She looks mixed in a way. So she looks like she's half black, half Arab or something like that. She has really nice curly hair, whatever. So it's so amazing that my student was telling me she wants to be like the singer, but it just wasn't just about the singer, right? It was about her persona. the way she presented herself, all the things that she admired about her. She wanted to become like that, right? And sometimes we don't realize, like we don't pick our role models. Like, oh, I'm gonna watch this show, and this girl is gonna become my role model. That's not how it works. It's all subconscious, right? So when you're watching a show, or you're like following somebody on social media for like 6 months, a year, 2 years, then you start to pick up on their little mannerisms, and you start to find it attractive. But it's based on your nafs, right? So if you're very insecure, you might find like somebody who's very loud and obnoxious to be somebody to look up to, right? Because you think that's what confidence looks like, but it doesn't have to look like that, right? So it depends on what state you're in, and then you will subconsciously choose your influence. So here what I'm telling you guys to do is, okay, how do I consciously choose my influence then? So you want to write down, what do you want to be like? Who do you want to be like, right? Go back to the seerah, find the women of the seerah, right? The women in Islamic history, or even like people like Oprah, right? She's non-Muslim, but she's a great role model, you know? So even like in our contemporary times, we have people who are inspirational for the good reasons, right? Okay, so just I'm giving like examples here. Evaluate, purge, keep. That's like a thing. You want to evaluate people. So these are all fake names. So if they have any resemblance, that was completely coincidental. So let's say you have Fatima, right? She's your friend. She's your close friend. She's a practicing Muslim, mashallah. She wears hijab. She goes to the masjid, everything. Respects her parents. But she is very prone to negativity. She's the most pessimistic person that you know. So what do you have to do now? You just get rid of Fatima? Khalas, she's gone. That's it. She's too negative. I can't deal with her negative energy. Exactly, because it's a habit, right? It's who they are, so they can't really separate it. Okay, so you can bring it to her attention, talk to her. Okay, Ahmed, your brother. You can't get rid of him, he's your brother. But he's always listening to this like insanely inappropriate rap music. Every time you're in the car with him, he blasts it. And you're like embarrassed, you want to hide. Then what do you do? Talk to him too? Okay. So what if he drops you off to work every day and picks you up from work every day? And you have to listen to that rap music every single day. What's going to happen to your thoughts after a month, after 3 months? Your thoughts are going to become kind of corrupted, right? So you might have to talk to him about discussing alternatives. Okay, let's listen to a podcast then. Like, you don't want to listen to music? Okay, you don't want to listen to Quran? We won't put on Quran. But can we listen to a nasheed? Can we listen to like maybe music that is not dirty, right? Like the innocent music from back in the day, or like just some instrumentals or something, right? You have to like see where the person is and kind of negotiate with them where they are. Sarah, your close friend who gets sad and anxious very easily, but she has a soft and pure heart. But she gets anxious about like everything. She gets depressed about everything. Like any small thing that goes wrong, boom, it's like she's down in the dumps. She gets this, like, she starts feeling despair in Allah.
Ask her what's making her feel very anxious,
Mm-hmm.
and try to talk to it.
Mm-hmm. And if it keeps happening, maybe she needs therapy. Yeah, maybe she needs professional help. Mindy, so Mindy's non-Muslim. She's a coworker who always complains about her husband, her job, the boss, and the company. So what do you do? She's your coworker. You spend like 6 to 8 hours with her every day.
Change the job.
Okay, maybe you can try changing your shift. You can try, or changing your job, whatever. I don't know. That, like, basically, awareness is key, right? Awareness is key. Now that you see this as real people, you might start thinking about real people in your life who are like this, right? And be like, okay, how do I deal with this person? Because if you're not aware of their effect on you, then you're more likely to be affected, right? So as long as you're aware, be like, okay, I'm feeling negative right now because I absorbed those negativity, but I'm gonna go purge it. How do you purge it? Give me some examples. If you're around negative people and now you're feeling heavy and you're feeling like, oh, like I can't even move because I'm so like overwhelmed, what do? What are some practical things you can do? Yeah, pray. That's great. And wudu is amazing because wudu, like, it's very calming, and like water, wipes out the fire. The Prophet even said when you're feeling angry, you can make wudu. Go out for a walk. Yeah, all those kinds of things. So last guy, Caleb, he's non-Muslim. He's a guy, whatever. He's very nice because he always brings like stuff for people to share, and he's like just very, very calm, gentle soul. If we keep him around, guess what? We can actually learn from his manners. Obviously, we're not going to become besties with him because he's a guy, but we can learn from non-Muslims' manners. So I learned, this was the biggest lesson I learned in grad school, because I was living with white people, and there were two girls I was living with, and they were non-Muslim, but I realized the manners that they had and the consideration they showed for me and my beliefs, and like making sure that there was like no alcohol at our gatherings, and there was even when we did Friendsgiving, like it was not an official school thing, it was just friends. All of them were non-Muslim. I was the only Muslim, but they were like, you know what, we're not going to have alcohol because Shahin can't drink, like he can't be at the same table, so we're just not going to. So they canceled it completely, and like every time I'd come home, like the way they would greet me, and I learned so many things from them that I didn't learn from my own family, because Desi families were not very like affectionate. Like sometimes you don't even smile at people, like you just say salam and you walk on. So from them, I learned the proper manners of how to treat people, how to greet them, right? It was a very small thing, but it stayed with me forever, because I was like, wow, like I don't smile when I come home, but I smile like over there, when I live with them. So I was like, oh, okay, like these are things I can pick up from them. So you can actually learn things from like anybody, right? I'm just gonna skip over the online thing. Okay, choosing influence. Story of friend X. Oh yeah, okay. So the point is here that the point I made in the very beginning was that we're always being influenced, but we don't know, right? And if you're naive, you think that you're a very independent thinker, and you're very like, yeah, I'm a critical thinker, I'm educated, I'm not gonna fall for like this person's, whatever they're preaching online, or I'm not gonna be influenced by somebody. But the truth is, we're always being influenced subconsciously, right? So now what can we do? We can choose our influence. And I actually knew somebody who was best friends with a spiritual mentor. Okay, the spiritual mentor was like very switched on, like always paid attention, always treated people really well, always, gave reminders about Allah, always was like just like had impeccable character, like the best character that you can think of. Like if you know somebody who has like amazing character, this was that person, right? But their best friend of 10 years was a narcissist. Literally, like actually by the psychological definition, was a narcissist. Like they would like spread lies about people, manipulate people, they would mistreat people, and after 10 years, this person had to cut them off. And the reason it took them 10 years to cut them off is because they were trying to do the right thing. They were trying to reform this person. Didn't work out. And so you might be thinking, how can you spend 10 years with someone who has like amazing character and knowledge that you can learn from, and you have like constant access to this person, but you just didn't learn anything, right? It's because you didn't choose to. Your heart wasn't in the right place, right? So if we choose to be influenced, so the biggest example we have is the Munafiqun versus Sahaba. It's really interesting because both of them had access to the Prophet ﷺ, right? The Munafiqun prayed behind the Prophet ﷺ. It's like you might be thinking, well, how are these the best of people and those are the worst of people? It's because their heart just corrupted. So Allah's light it did not enter, right? Allah chose not to let His light enter their hearts because they didn't have the intention, right? That's the power of intention. But the believers, like Allah says, a different place in the Quran, like when you read the Quran, it increases your iman, right? Allah says the believers are the ones who, when Allah is mentioned, their hearts tremble, right? It's not just a tremble out of fear, it's awe, right? Because you're so connected to Allah, you feel like, oh my God, these words are heavy on me, right? So we should always be asking ourselves, what's the state of my heart? Is my heart in a state where I can be influenced, right? Sometimes people ask, well, I read the Quran and nothing happens. It's a very common complaint. I read the Quran, I open the Quran, and nothing happens. My heart doesn't feel anything. I feel numb, right? It's because we didn't empty out all that stuff. So the Quran is not influencing us in the way we want it to, right? But when the heart is empty, when it's clean, when it can actually have space to receive Allah's guidance, then something happens to the heart, right? Now you're choosing, you're making the intention to be influenced by the Quran. So again, we have the sponge theme because I want to stick in your head that you are constantly like a walking sponge. You are constantly absorbing messages everywhere, right? So your biggest question should be, what are you absorbing? All right, so the takeaway for this is every day I will choose which voices to listen to and which people I hang around with, online and offline. My consistent input, whatever basically you're listening to, it's going to determine your thoughts and your feelings, right? And then it's going to come out in your behavior. Okay, so we have 20 minutes. Do we want to go on to the next lesson, or do we want to stop here?
No, we should go on.
We go on? Actually, you look sleepy.
I have a question.
Yes, you can
Is
ask.
the next lesson related to this topic or?
It's related.
Okay.
Okay. Because I felt bad. I feel like last 2 times I ended super early. So I was like, you know what? If there's time, I'll just ask you guys and we can go. Okay, so I just love this picture, by the way. It was the best one I found on Canva. And I was like, wow. Like, anyway. Okay, so, all right, the power of reflection. So I'm using the word reflection, but I mean like tadabbur, tafakkur, all that. So the stuff that you're learning now, right? Let's say you chose to be influenced, right? You made a conscious choice. Okay, I want to be influenced by positive people. I'm choosing my role models. I'm going to start learning more about Islam. I'm going to start going to the masjid. You made that choice. Now what? You're acquiring all this knowledge, but sometimes it doesn't do anything for you, right? And the reason it doesn't do anything for you is because it's still up here. It hasn't really entered within, right? So now how do you make the stuff go deep? Right? How do you make yourself stop yourself from forgetting? So the Prophet ﷺ said in hadith, the longer form of this hadith is that he said, the strong believer is better than the weak believer, but there is good in both. Like Allah loves both of them, but the strong believer is better. And he's talking primarily about the strength of iman. And then he goes on to say, seek that which is beneficial and do not be helpless. فَلَا تَعْجَزْ, right? Ta'jaz is like this type of weakness, a type of laziness. But it's not laziness like I don't want to do something. It's laziness like I can't do something, right? When you feel incapacitated, you feel paralyzed. You feel paralyzed in your mind and in your life. Like you can't do anything. It's basically learned helplessness in psychology terms. So he's saying seek that which is beneficial and do not be helpless. Like don't give up, right? No matter what stage you are in life, don't give up. And so if you're seeking beneficial knowledge, right, then you're going to go deeper into it. The knowledge is not going to benefit you until you reflect on it, right? It's a crucial point. So reflection is basically deep thought, and it's different from overthinking, because overthinking is a bad thing. What is overthinking? It's like a spider web. So imagine a spider web. When the spider gets on it, like, not a spider, when the prey, right? The spider's prey gets on it, he gets stuck, right? That's like you. If you're overthinking, you're going to be constantly stuck. It's like a maze. You can't actually find your way out. So if, like, let's say you have an issue. Can somebody give an issue, like an example of something that somebody might overthink about? Could be anything, something small.
You have a presentation from work and you're just thinking, oh my gosh, am I going to do okay?
Okay. Yeah, so you're like, so it starts off as like a legitimate question, right? And then it's like, okay, will I do okay? And then it's like, oh, I won't do okay. If I don't do okay, what happens? I'll get fired, or I'll get demoted, or this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And then you're like in a way worse state the next morning than you started off, right? And you might have a great presentation, but you might not do well just because of the thoughts, right? And we spoke about earlier that when you have these negative thoughts, even from yourself, Shaitan wants to come and he'll hijack those thoughts. Right, that's Shaitan's job. Anything negative that's there, he's just like going to light it on fire, right? Because as our enemy, he's going to attack our mind as well, right? And then, what is reflection? Reflection is deep thinking. It's like an ocean, right? So it's a little bit scary at first because sometimes you don't know what you're going to find. Imagine yourself as the ocean. If you haven't thought about yourself and your own intentions and your own relationship with Allah, or your own relationship with your parents, for example, which is a very sensitive relationship, when you first start to reflect, it might be scary. Because it's scary to face ourselves, right? Because all of us want to believe that we're pretty good people, right? That we're good people. But sometimes we have certain diseases in our heart, right? Sometimes we have certain decisions that we made in the past that are still haunting us, and we don't want to face them. So reflection can be scary for that reason. But it's actually, the deeper that you go, Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah, he said that when Shaitan caused Adam to fall, right, by eating from the tree, he didn't know that when, a diver sinks to the bottom of the sea, he gathers pearls and then comes back up, right? So even though Adam alayhi salam was spiritually drowning, he actually gathered the wisdom and he came back up and he said, رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا, right? What was that wisdom that he gathered? It was that he always needs Allah's mercy. right? He realized his own humanness. He realized his own weakness. So whatever negative thing you find when you reflect, think of it like, okay, I'm going down in the ocean. It's really dark. It's really scary. But I'm going to find those pearls. I'm going to come back up, right? Because Allah is the one who told us to reflect. It's an act of worship. So if you're doing an act of worship, even if it's scary, there has to be something good that comes out, right? And basically, where overthinking creates more confusion, right? It never gives you a solution. Reflection creates clarity. If you actually reflect the proper way, it's going to give you answers, right? It's going to give you peace. It's going to give you some sort of like, okay, I got this answer and I can live with it. I don't have to keep asking myself the same questions over and over. So it's deliberate and it's personal. And sometimes for people might have different, like Allah might give them a personal opening regarding an issue that they're facing. So Kashf is basically like a type of spiritual unveiling where certain realities Allah shows you about like your own situation. Like let's say you went through something like 10 years ago and you've been struggling with it, but now you've been on this path of tazkiyah and maybe you worked with a therapist, whatever. And now all of a sudden you get this light bulb moment, right? After all this work, finally you get this like, okay, wow, all of this made sense. Like all the pain I went through, now it makes sense. That's from Allah, right? And ilham is like, it's similar to kashf, which is what happened with the mother of Musa alayhi salam, for example, like in the Quran when the mother of Musa was scared and she couldn't realize, like she didn't understand what to do with her son because he was about to be killed, and Allah inspired her to put him in the river. Okay, so you exert effort to understand something substantial, Allah will bless your thoughts. So He guides your feelings, guides your intuition. Istikhara works in this way, right? Some people think that, oh, if I do istikhara, I have to get a dream. It's not necessary, right? Like only some people might get dreams, but even then, like your own mind, it might be jumbled up, right? So how does this actually work? So when you do istikhara, like either you feel very, very at ease with something, like you really feel calm and it feels like it's coming to you very easily, or you're going to start to feel a lot of like, you know, a lot of red flags will pop up. You'll start to feel like, you know, thing in your chest, like, oh, this doesn't feel right, right? We call it the gut feeling, we call it intuition, whatever. It's the same thing. And the other thing about istikhara is that either Allah will facilitate the path, if it's good for you, like He's going to remove the obstacles, all the obstacles that you thought were there, He'll remove them, or He's going to consistently put obstacles in your path to let you know not to do that, right? Okay, so again, overthinking causes confusion and agitation because you want your mind to like shut off, right? A lot of people who struggle with this, they wish they could just turn their mind off because it doesn't let them sleep at night, right? Whereas reflection will give you clarity and peace. Okay, so what are the 5 different ways to divide reflection, right? So this is based off of a Yaqeen Institute article, which is super long and super academic, so you can go read it if you're interested in that. But I just wanted to like simplify and, you know, kind of make it easy to understand because a lot of people just like always ask this question, right? What is the difference between tafakkur and tadabbur? Are those words interchangeable or are they something different? All of these words can be sometimes used interchangeably, but they do have a difference, right? So tadhakkur, the first one, is to remember, comes from dhikr, right? Dhakara means to remember, or to bring something to attention after forgetting it. Okay, so for example, like I, you know, reminded myself that I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow. That's tadhakkur. Or I remembered that last week I missed my fajr and I didn't pray qada. So now I'm like, okay, I have to go pray because I missed that fajr. You know, that's tadhakkur. You just remember something. Tafakkur is to actively bring something to your awareness. So you're like, maybe you're taking a hike. You're on like you're taking a hike and there's like it's really nice, whatever. And you're like, oh, let me reflect on the creation of Allah. So it's a conscious intention you made. You could have just been like, yeah, whatever, listening to music, right? Put on your AirPods and whatever, but you took off whatever you're listening to and you made yourself present in that moment and you're like, you know what? I'm going to actively remember Allah. Maybe you read the dua, Rabbana, what was it? Rabbana ma khalaqta hadha batila, is that what it is? Rabbana ma khalaqta hadha batila. Yeah, like, oh Allah, you have not created all of this in vain, right? Subhanak, and then you're praising Allah. So you're deliberately taking that, you know, that state that you're in and you're remembering Allah. Tadabbur means to follow a thought either to its logical end or starting foundation. And tadabbur has that word dubur. Dubur means like back, right? In Surah Yusuf where they said his shirt was ripped from the back. Same word is used here. So tadabbur is like, okay, maybe you are already studying Quran, right? You're already studying tafsir. And then you ask yourself, okay, how does this surah connect with the previous surah? Or how does this ayah connect with the previous ayah? And what is the conclusion that it's taking me to? Right? Because if you listen to like surah, what's that one? Alaq, right? Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. It starts in one area. It's talking about knowledge and Allah's power and the human being's creation. And then where does it end? It ends with prayer, right? The ayah of sajda, it ends with prayer. And Allah, towards the end, Allah's talking about punishing people who are arrogant, right? Which was referring to the Prophet's uncle, right? So the surah seemingly takes a different, different trajectory. A lot of surahs do this, where it seems like Allah's changing the topic, right? Because Allah doesn't tell stories in the Quran in a linear fashion. Allah tells like snapshots, right? He'll give you like Musa alayhi salam's story, then he'll come out, give you somebody else's story. Like in Maryam, Surah Maryam, right? We have Zakariya's story, we have Maryam's story, we have Ibrahim alayhi salam's story, and then we have the other prophets. So when Allah gives you these snapshots, tadabbur would be like, okay, Allah started here, and then He went to this, okay, He went to that. What does that mean? What is the connection? Because we know there's a connection even if we don't understand it, right? Muhasaba is to take yourself to account, self-audit like we talked about before, where you ask yourself before you go to bed or whenever, maybe even after salah, like, okay, what did I do right today? Were my intentions in the right place? Did I actually do something for Allah? Was I struggling with any negative emotions in my heart when I met with this person today, right? You're just asking yourself all those tazkiyah type questions. Muraqaba comes from the word raqaba, which means to watch, and Allah's name Ar-Raqib, the most watchful, it also comes from the same root word. So this means basically to be watchful over one's heart while being aware of Allah's presence. So muraqaba, like with some shuyukh, if they do like, when they do dhikr together, they'll have you sit and meditate, right? And their version of meditation is basically muraqaba, like they'll tell you to close your eyes. Maybe they'll guide you through it, or they'll have you do it on your own, whatever you prefer. And the time I did it, our teacher was like, okay, I want you to close your eyes and imagine that like you're looking at your heart as a third person. Like you're standing outside of your heart and you're imagining your heart. I mean, you're looking at your heart from the outside in. Now keep in mind what you see, right? That's one level. And then he said, zoom out and imagine Allah looking at you, looking at your heart, right? And then imagine Allah looking straight at your heart. Like, what does Allah see? Like, what is Allah trying to show you, right? Because Allah says in the Quran that Allah knows like what's in the chest and what's more hidden than that, right? So you might be aware, like, okay, my heart like loves this person, or my heart wants whatever, or my heart wants to follow this career path. But really, when you really go deep within yourself and you're in that space and you already like done dhikr of Allah, and it's recommended that you do lots of dhikr before you go into muraqabah, because you want shaitan to be away, right? In Surah An-Nas, we ask Allah for refuge from shaitan. So shaitan can whisper into the chest, but when the heart is protected with dhikr, shaitan has no access, right? So when you do a bunch of dhikr, and it could be anything, salawat upon the Prophet ﷺ, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, make istighfar, whatever, and then you sit down to do muraqabah, and preferably be in a state of wudu as well, because you want to minimize the effect of shaitan as much as possible. And then you look into your own heart and you find what Allah is telling you, right? Just some examples, like people who are overthinking, they might be like, am I a loser? Do people not like me? This might be somebody who's struggling with social anxiety, right? Or somebody who has low iman might be like, does Allah not love me, right? Is something wrong with me? Is that why Allah's not giving me the things that I want? Somebody who's having like relationship problems might be thinking like, oh, is this person cheating on me? And they might not, right? They might not, but they might have these thoughts, right? Whereas if you reflect, you could be like, okay, let me try to uncover why I'm thinking this way, right? What does this have to do with my childhood? What does this have to do with me, like with my experience right now, right? How is my past affecting my present? And this last one I found is very relevant to us as women, because I feel like, some people are just coming out of their post-feminist haze. Some people are just still in that phase. There's different types of opinions that we hold, right? And so there's a lot of women who say this openly, right? I'm not comfortable with the idea of obeying a man. So then they're like, okay, I've heard all these cultural things. I've heard about what that means. What does obeying a man mean, right? Your father, your husband, or whoever. What does that really mean? So they're like, okay, I'm going to go study this for myself, because when I hear the word obedience, something happens to me, right? Why is that happening? Because maybe they were forced to obey certain things that were not even right? They were just cultural, they weren't really Islamic. So it's just like asking yourself these questions and reflecting on why you might be feeling the way you feel. Okay, so reflecting on relationships. Okay, I'll just do one example for the sake of time, and we can continue next time, inshallah. So just one scenario. You get very upset and triggered when someone doesn't text you back quickly. It's a very common problem with people, for people who have anxious attachment, right? So they actually get very anxious and very upset if they don't get a response within like a few minutes. And they'll constantly check their phone, like it's a real problem, right? So then what are some questions they can ask themselves? Why am I getting triggered, right? Do I believe I'm less important? Is it a value issue? Are you not convinced that they actually value you, right? Or am I jealous that they're spending more time with somebody else? And that somebody else could be their mother. That somebody else could be their best friend. It doesn't have to be like the opposite gender, right? Do I want them to wait on me the way I wait on them? Do you feel this is like an injustice issue? Like, do you feel that you're doing them a service by waiting on them and that they're not doing the same for you? Are my abandonment issues getting triggered? Right? Maybe like when you were little, your parents sent you to boarding school. They didn't do anything wrong, but your abandonment issues were triggered and you always feel like you have to chase people. Maybe it's that. Or are they actually just a bad communicator, right? So the uncovering, what I mean by that is like when you ask yourself these questions, sometimes you'll realize the problem is not you, right? Sometimes it is you, but sometimes it's not you. It's just them, and they're just really bad at getting back to people, right? There's really bad texters, or they're just super, super busy, and they're not going to get back to you, but they'll call you, right? So you just have to ask yourself what's actually going on. So this is a very small scenario, but see how many things we can ask ourselves. So imagine like the bigger things in life. There's so many questions we could be asking ourselves instead of making assumptions, right? So when the people who are making assumptions, they're overthinking, whereas the people who are asking themselves clarifying questions, they're reflecting, right? And it's actually giving them clarity. You come to a place of clarity after this. All right, سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Any questions? Comments?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to make it quick.
Yeah, of course.
for the time.
Yeah. And we've had 3 minutes. I just wanted to end because, yeah.
So, this was such a helpful lecture, alhamdulillah. One of the things that I'm seeing in my day-to-day life is a huge distrust that people have of other people. So, it's kind of crazy how many people tell me, like, I was never personally betrayed by anybody, but because I see it happening so often in relationships and
Yeah.
friendships, I just don't trust people.
Oh, wow.
So it doesn't really impact the way that they carry themselves in terms of, they're still talking to people,
Yeah.
they're still building relationships, but they just refuse to deeply connect with somebody because they have this sense of betrayal based on what they're observing around them. So how would you apply the tips that we talked about now to somebody like that, who nothing is really happening directly to them, but they're just noticing it in the world around them and it's impacting their own demeanor?
Wow, that's a deep question.
I'm sorry.
No, it's so good though. Like that's what I mean by deep. It's such a good question. I feel like I've seen that too. I just never knew how to articulate it. But are you talking more about friendships, or like when people are talking to each other for marriage, or both? Is it like, okay?
It feeds into this other trend that I'm noticing, and I'm actually like really asking Allah for protection because I don't want to get sucked into this. But the way that it seems like men don't like women and women don't like men is like this war between the genders now. And it's bought in by this fact that people are like, well, look, I heard this story of so-and-so, woman doing this to this man, and it's like things that don't even happen to them personally, but they're getting affected. It's like that sponge picture, they're absorbing this negativity that's around them, and it's really affecting their perspective towards other people.
Wow. Okay, so one, like they're keeping tally of it, right? We do have like, I guess we are biased. We have a negativity bias to like collect all the bad stuff, but they are keeping tabs on it and they're focusing on it. So whatever you focus on grows, right? And the whole element of shaitan, shaitan doesn't want relationships, right? That's number one. So we have to acknowledge the spiritual aspect. If we don't, then we're more susceptible to falling into it. So like one, okay, like it happened to that person because it was qadar Allah. Like they had to learn something from it. And inshallah, if they do their work, they'll come out better, like as a better person, as a stronger person from their experiences. That's about what happened in the past to other people, right? Dealing with that piece of like, okay, a lot of betrayal is happening. Why is it happening? It's happening because on individual levels, it was Allah's qadr. I guess, why is it such a huge issue? I don't know, that's a different issue. Like, why are people betraying each other, right? Is it easier for them to just run away instead of facing the issues head on? Like, is that why people just, leave, like ghosting people and stuff? But for that person, like themselves, right, they have to ask themselves, despite everything that's going on, do I want to be in a relationship? Or do I want a deep friendship? Because your desire for what you want has to be greater than your fear. And they're still living in that fear. So once that desire is strong enough, because whatever you really truly desire, you're going to go after it no matter what, right? So it's like, okay, you have that desire. I want to have an authentic friendship. I want to have an authentic relationship. How do I meet that person? First, you become that person. And you trust Allah. Like, you trust Allah that He will bring to you the caliber of people, like the way that you yourself choose to carry yourself, right? Because if you're stuck in fear, you have a choice to also betray somebody else, right? Let me hurt them before they hurt me. But if you're rooted in yourself and you're rooted in Allah and you know Allah's watching everything, that's why I love Allah's name as Shahin, the witness, because literally it just, I don't know, it's beautiful. It's so comforting. So you're like, okay, Allah is the witness of every interaction I have with this person. If they wrong me even the slightest way, Allah has my back, right? And you constantly walk with that confidence and that assurance that Allah's with you no matter what, as long as you are upright. Right? Because Allah has so many guarantees of like He's with the sabirun, He's with those who have tawakkul in Him, He's with, like Allah loves the believers and He protects the believers. Like there's so many different reassurances Allah has already given us. So you have that reassurance. And then the third part of this is that there is always risk and vulnerability in any relationship. That's Brene Brown has a whole bunch of stuff on that. Like you will always be taking a risk. You will never know for sure. But that's why your tawakkul has to be stronger than your fear. Yeah, I hope that answered the question. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay. Yes. By the way, you guys are not obligated to sit because it's past 7:30, so. Oh, yeah.